Take your children, take care of their parents. Like children.
Okay, before we start the debate, I'd like to request the speakers to introduce themselves in their speaking order, starting from side government, which is on the judge's left-hand side.
Hi everyone, my name is Sharupa Thanal. I'm currently studying in KUSOL first semester. Thank you. I'm going as the Prime Minister from Side Proposition.
Hi everyone, my name is Elisha Gimire. I am going as the DPM, which is the second speaker.
Hi guys, I am Avinav Kumar. I'll be going as your government whip, and I have recently graduated from Radhabama School.
Hello everyone, I'm Suyog Vardhanasari. I'll be going as the leader of opposition. I studied in Akshara School. I'm an SC graduate.
Hi everyone, my name is Srizan Podel. I am going as a deputy leader of opposition and also the reply speaker for this debate.
Hello everyone, my name is Spars Adhikari. I'm going as the opposition whip and I am recently +2 graduate from St. Xavier's College.
Thanks so much, speakers. Before a few ground rules before we start. The speaking time is 8 minutes. You'll be hearing a clap in the first and the 7th minute, before which is the protected time. After 8 minutes, the adjudicator won't be listening to what you say, and you all have to wrap up your speech within 8 minutes and 15 seconds. Please be respectful and polite towards each other. POIs are highly encouraged. We request the speakers to engage as much as possible. With that being said, the motion on the floor is this House would require children to take care of their parents. Without any further ado, inviting the Prime Minister to open the debate. Here.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Imagine you're an 80-year-old person with Alzheimer's. You are living in an old age home where you didn't want to be in the first place, but you're put there by your children. Now you're trying to escape that place, you're running on the street but you forgot the way back. And now you're stranded on the road. 3 days you haven't eaten anything. On the 4th day, you die. That is the present case scenario that we're talking about. And these are the people that side opposition is not going to protect in this debate, but we are. We protect the most vulnerable. That is why we win this debate from the get-go. I'll do 3 things in my speech. First, I'll tell you why it is the moral obligation of the children to protect and take care of these parents when they're old. Second, I'll tell you why we have better community and communal feeling under our side. First, on why there is a principal obligation for these children to protect and take care of these parents. 2 layers of analysis. First, think about a child. How a child is vulnerable when he's 5 years old or 2 years old. He probably poops, I'll take it in the 5th minute. He probably poops in his pants, he probably cannot speak, he cries all the time, but parents take these cues and infer that the child is hungry. That is to say, parents take care of these children when they are most vulnerable, when they cannot speak, when they cannot fend for themselves, when they cannot properly think, right? So when these parents are the most vulnerable, what do we mean by this? We mean that these parents are economically capable, or even at a point when they're not economically able to earn, they'll still have pension or some sort of support. But we're talking, this debate happens in a context where these parents are physically unable to take care of themselves, meaning their hands don't work, or they can probably not walk, or in a case when they're mentally incapable to form coherent thoughts. that is the context in which we're debating. Even if we're not just talking about economically vulnerable, but we're talking about a context where these parents are emotionally vulnerable as well. Now, how does this reciprocity work? When a child is the most vulnerable in his infant days, if in that context parents are actively taking care of that child, it becomes the child has a moral obligation to take care of that parent when they are the most vulnerable, when they're 80 years old or 70 years old. Why is this principle applicable? Think about a stranger. If a stranger takes care of you when you have an accident, you do have certain kind of humanitarian relationship with that stranger and you take care of that person. Now, in the present scenario, the government will not force you to take care of that stranger, but you probably have to, right? Because that is how community works. And in the present state, you're not likely to help that stranger, but you have to. You have to have that obligation to keep humanity alive. That is why the state is making a requirement for these children to take care of their parents. Second layer of analysis in the very principle. Think about sacrifices. When you're born, your mother probably left her job. Like that is the status quo in Nepal and in various other developing nations, right? Not just mother, like your dad probably worked overtime, or one of your parents worked overtime, the other was staying at home to take care of you. Those sort of sacrifices are the sacrifices that we're talking about in this debate. Now, what do these sacrifices further look like? If you're passionate about dancing, you probably put that because now you want to spend more time with your child, right? Now, the same reciprocity applies when your parents are old. What do they really want? They want a 3-time meal, and they just want to spend time with their children. Now, if your parents actively choose to spend time with you by quitting your job, you don't even have to quit your job when your parents are old. You just have to take out some time from your work life to spend time with your child. Now that moral reciprocity exists. Now I know what Srijata is going to talk about in his speech, or like what side opposition is going to bring. They're going to tell you that, oh, the children didn't really consent to being born. But sure, think about it this way. Parents never really consented to giving birth to children. Hear me out here. Parents were obligated to give birth because that is how societal norms work. Because generally, we're conditioned to have children. We're told that, oh, you have to take up your family legacy. You have to make babies. Civilization has to go on. That is why most people have babies in the first place. They're preconditioned. They're told multiple times. Or in a world where that conditioning did not exist, I think a lot of people would not have babies at all. That is to say, free will does not exist at all. Like if the parents have grievances towards society, these children have grievances towards their parents for bringing them to this world. If free will does not exist and world is an unfair place, then obligations work this way to concede or like to take or like make the societal fabric, or just for the society to work, these obligations have to work too. Yes, I'll take one now.
If you are correct that state coerces parents to take care of the children, why does this obligation to take care of them applies to children and not the state in this scenario?
Alright, so I think generally it's not just the state that coerces parents to take care of their children, but it's general societal fabric. We're not just talking about governments, we're talking about long-term civilizations. If you want to just erase that kind of history from your mind, then probably the idea that you talked about would be true, but specifically in this context, children are the ones that should be taking care of their children because of all the reasons that I gave to you earlier. Because how they're vulnerable, and when they are vulnerable, parents took care of them. And secondly, parents made a lot of sacrifices despite not having the obligation to take care of them, right? Because I've already established how parents do not have that obligation, because that is how society imposes that obligation onto them. Because of all the reasons that I gave above, your PY and the case that you're going to bring is already out of hand. Now, coming to my second argument about how we build better community. Now, what is community in general? When we're talking about community, we're talking about values that we imbibe by. Generally, think about America. Most people in America live in nuclear families. They do not live with their parents. Now, think about the values that they imbibe by. Although it is, I'll not take any more PYs. So, they're living in a nuclear family. Now, well, sure, America might be developed, but there are so many other convoluted factors that are applicable in societies that value community. And when children are living with their parents, I think that sense of community is inherently developed in these children. What does that look like? First, you're thinking not just about yourself, but you're also thinking about other people. That when you probably put food on your table, you feel like, oh, I should not eat all of it because I have to save some for my parents because we are a large family. Now that kind of sharing of resources and other kind of values that people imbibe by are the impacts that we're going to bring forward in this debate. Now why is that communal value exclusive under our side? Sure, you can derive communal value from friendships and whatnot, but think about relationships. What is the most intricate relationship in our society? We get to choose our friends, we get to choose other people in our lives, but we do not really get to choose our parents, right? Children or like parents don't really get to choose their children. You get what you get. So that kind of relationship is unique in itself. That means you are put into a place where you have to be bond with that person no matter what. And I think in that scenario, that is when people learn to have those communal feelings and learn from those communal feelings and generally work for the greater good. With that, I'd like to say that ILY in family stands for I love you, and we believe that parents and children should be loved alike. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Speaker, for that fine speech. You spoke for 8 minutes and 1 second to open the case from side opposition, inviting the leader of opposition. Here you go.
Panel, side proposition comes here and tells us that parents take care of their children when they are in a vulnerable state. That means parents, when they are in a vulnerable state, kids should take care of them, right? But panel also notice that it's not just consenting to being born that exists for children, which absolutely does not exist. Children don't consent to being born, and I'll come to that. But they also don't consent to being in a vulnerable state of position. That is to say, when they are born, children aren't the one who dictate whether they are in a vulnerable position or not. But even before that, what do we get from side proposition? First, we get the principal obligation. That is two layers of analysis. First, parents provide to children when they are vulnerable and take care of them, which we've already told you how if there is no consent to being vulnerable in the first place, then it probably means that parents are the ones making choices at the end of the day to raise their children from the vulnerable position, and it's not something that kids specifically ask their children to do so. Kids specifically ask their parents to do so, so moral obligation doesn't exist. Second layer is that parents sacrifice for their children. That is to say, maybe taking certain jobs to to make the livelihood a lot easier, or doing certain things or sacrificing in some other ways, right? But panel, just notice that there's always benefit for the parents, and parents are always in a way greedy and selfish when it comes to themselves, and that's probably why they give birth to the children in the first place. What does this selfishness look like? Panel, see, side proposition also comes here and tells us that the consent of parents giving birth to their children doesn't exist. But panel, just in terms of plain consent, you look at both sides. Number one, there's an unborn child, and number two, there's a family who has the choice to resist societal narrative, for which they might face criticism for doing so, but they still do have the choice to a certain degree. On the which side of the side is consent a greater thing? Probably on the outside of the house, because parents still do have the choice. On their side of the house is an unborn child panel. They simply can't provide consent because they don't exist when they are just about to be born. Then panel, let's go to next point. Side proposition also comes here and tells you that a family, that communal values, right? Communal values where you don't get to choose who your mother or who your child is. Even in such instances, we believe that this communal values comes at the cost of personal values being deprived, which I'll cover further down my speech. But before that, yes.
By your own logic, don't you think existence is the first prerequisite for consent?
Sure, existence is the prerequisite of consent, and that's why an unborn child can't consent to being born. Then, let's why children are vulnerable, right? Because children are vulnerable, they didn't consent to this because parents choose to give birth and raise them. So they need all the assistance and dependency, not because of their own choice, but because of the choice of the parents. But secondly, panel, just understand that there is a bare minimum requirement for parents to take care of their children. That is to say, legally, they are only supposed to provide them food, maybe education, and certain things which are the things that this child probably doesn't completely cater to the needs of his children. If that is the case, then just understand that the benefits reaped by the parents is much greater, because just understand the kind of benefit these parents get, right? First, they get tax subsidies in a lot of countries when they have family and when they have children. Secondly, they also get the prestige of society and the idea that their lineage is going to get continued. That's the form of emotional benefits that the children don't get but parents do get, right? So just imagine when you have children who have the greater bit of benefit and who will disproportionately benefit. It's probably parents, right? We don't see as to how benefits received by children overweighs that. But before all of this panel, just let's understand why parents give birth to children in the first place. There are probably 5 reasons for this. First, parents give birth to their children because of societal reasons, the society presses them to do so. Secondly, because they want children to take care of them when they're old, that is also selfish reason. Thirdly, to enjoy the fun of raising children. Fourthly, because of religious narratives where you go to the heaven if you give birth to children, right? All of these panels just notice as selfish reasons. And at the point of time where parents give birth to their children because of their own selfish reasons, we don't see as to how children who didn't even consent to being born in the first place and were born simply because the parents decided that they should exist, we don't see as to how they are morally obligated to take care of their children in the first place, right? But then, when does a child not want to take care of their parents, right? When does this debate even happen? If a child wants to take care of their parents because of moral obligations, sure, they can just do so as they should be doing, right? But at the point of time when children who otherwise would not take care of their parents, that's when this debate starts to happen, right? And this is because of legitimate reasons panels. These legitimate reasons look like emotional and mental trauma with parents because parents restrict the freedom of children and because of unmatchable expectations that parents set on children, right? Then what is our counter policy? Our counter policy is quite simple, panel. Our counter policy is that state will be required to take care of parents. Why is it better? First, state has a higher moral obligation to as it reaps benefits from the people when they are young and independent economically, but pushes the responsibility to children after they become old and independent. Secondly, holding state accountable for the kind of livelihood that the older people get is also possible because a vast majority of voter base are older people who are parents and grandparents, right? Third, because we don't know the financial condition of children panel. This is very important because they may be struggling financially in a world where meeting needs of parents is hard. The world is capitalistic and most people struggle to meet their basic needs sufficiently. On comparative, we know the socio-economic condition of state and what it's capable of providing because it's a large economy and not an individual. Fund and resources by the government is likely to be allocated because it caters to most voter bases and politicians are also older conservative people who want these older people to be taken care of. Finally, panel, what's our argument? Our argument is very simple. Children are in a vulnerable state and born in a world full of suffering where they go through corporate structure, emotional trauma, breakups, etc. without consent. All of that this child does not want to go through. A large part of how we live our life, even as an adult, is dictated by our life from childhood. Example can be the education we receive, the life experiences dictated by our parents. If that is so, then most people in the world are unhappy because they are forced to do a job they studied about but they don't want to because their parents force them to. Secondly, people are unable to love and marry people because of racism and things as such because their parents don't allow it, right? You can't force children to take care of these parents because these children are already so unhappy in the world because of the parents. And that's very simple analogy is let's say I get 1 crore without asking anybody, but now the person expects 5 crores from me, a lot more benefits than what I have gotten. And that too without me asking. So I'm in a debt without me knowing that I'm in a debt. Wow, that's a very beautiful world that we live in. Very powerful proposal. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your wonderful speech. You spoke for 7 minutes and 29 seconds. To continue from government, inviting the Deputy Prime Minister here. Order.
Assign my speech in 3,
Rule 1. This debate should have never been about consent. Because when Charlotte in her speech establishes that the world is not a place where free choice is respected, then making an entire argument about why children did not consent to being born is what already loses them the debate. And this is what I'm going to be doing in my speech. Two things. Firstly, on the clash, on the principal clash, on everything that the both sides have said, and second, on which side are the most vulnerable better off, and on who does the obligation to take care of old people exist. Firstly, on the clash on principle. Our principle was extremely simple. We told you that surely children may not have been consented to being born, but if someone has properly taken care of you when you are the most vulnerable, it is now your moral obligation to take care of them when they are the most vulnerable. Here, they tell you that children did not consent to being born, and they concede to our response that you do have to take care of someone when they are vulnerable, right? But the only response Suyo gives you is that parents give birth to children for selfish reason. Let's really look at that. Do parents really give birth to children for selfish reason? Because the reason that he gives you is probably societal narratives and the benefits that that parents get, right? But surely children don't consent to vulnerability, but parents also don't consent to the vulnerability that their old age brings them. They don't consent to the kinds of diseases that they get infected to. They don't consent to the kinds of discriminations that they face. Because notice that it is not just selfish reasons why parents give birth. Because firstly, the parents probably have a lot of sacrifices, and that is where the impact of our principle stands. We tell you that parents sacrifice for their kids. What does that look like? This probably means that you probably have to work overtime and sacrifice your health so that you can provide for your child. This means that you have to probably face a lot of discrimination in society, because you probably don't have the social life that you otherwise would have had if you did not have your child. This means that you don't have the connection that you otherwise would have had, right? This means that parents also did not consent to the kinds of loneliness that they might deal with. But secondly, parents also did not consent to the kinds of feelings of sadness that they will now feel when you abandon them. Because if it is true and you buy the entire analysis on why parents only give birth to child because they want to feel these happy emotions, if parents only wanted these happy emotions, they never consented to being sad because their child left them in the street and probably left them in an old age home. This means that this debate is not about free will, because let's take them at their best and say that free choice did not exist for the child. But if that is true, it is really unclear as to why people really live, right? Because we never consented to being born, but we still consent to following the orders of society. We still consent to doing a job and going about our life because we need to live our life. We still consent to helping people that exist in our community because these are the kinds of societies that we live in. But also notice that these consent that we give are things that also benefit us to live in a society. This is why we think that even if you are by the argument of free will, we think that the fact that people still do things in society that helps them survive is the response to why free will does not win them the debate. If you drown in a river, you did not consent to being drowned, but you still need to heal yourself, because that is an obligation that you have to yourself. We think that in a similar place, you have obligation to people that raised you and probably sacrificed a lot for you. This is the reason why we think that our principal clash still stands in the debate. To win this debate, they have to tell us why firstly, children don't have to sacrifice as much for their parent, but secondly, they also have to tell you why the entire argument on our vulnerable emotional reciprocity does not exist. Before I move on to my second clash, I'll take a view.
Okay. Is it a consent if you don't have a choice to work because you don't want to starve?
Wait, can you repeat, please?
Is it a consent to work if you don't work and you starve and you simply don't have a choice to not work?
Yeah, surely these are, but again, you never consent. You probably didn't choose to be born, but you still have to do jobs because otherwise you would starve. In the same way, you have to take care of your parents, because if you don't, they might die, and these are things that impact you in the same level as you not having a job, because you are emotionally connected to that parent. So what happens to that parent probably affects you. Second clash on whose obligation it is to take care of the rich people. This is where we get the counter model. They tell you that it is on the state's obligation to take care of rich people. And we think that we do agree that to some extent it is the obligation of state to look after the people that exist within the state, right? It is probably a divided obligation, right? It is the obligation of the state to probably make sure that the external conditions of the state are good enough for old people to survive. This probably looks like renovating old age homes, but this probably looks like bettering the allowances that you give to rich people. These are the obligations that the state has. But notice that the relationship that you have with your child is much more than just financial, right? You are probably very emotionally and sentimentally bonded with with your child, which means that the things that you require from your child are not just financial, but also emotional. This is where our benefit on emotional reciprocity stands, right? Because surely that the state might take care of me, but the fact that my child is taking care of me, these are the things that the parents will be able to derive more happiness and satisfaction out of, as opposed to the state taking care of them. Surely the state might give them better facilities, but people that provide them a home, or people that are probably emotionally there for them in times of them dealing with health, sickness and things as such, we think that these are the things that give them the most happiness. So we think that on an emotional level, it is the obligation of a child to reciprocate the kinds of emotion that the parents have given them. Before I move on, yes.
So if parents' sacrifices make them sad, then it should be true that all the people who live and die alone are happier than the people who live with their families and their children. Is it true?
But that is subjective, because different people have different experiences. In most instances, when a parent lives with their child, they are emotionally bonded with their child. And in instances that, like you were talking about, where someone is living alone, then they don't necessarily have like the bonds that they are going to grieve when people die. So we think that that is like a different instance from what we're debating about today. Notice what Shalupa's second argument was, because we bring you an extension on why we think that better communal values are provided in society. And we think that that argument was important, because humanity and the ways that humanity functions does function on the foundations of community and the communal values that exist in society. The reason we help each other and we are cooperative with each other is because we were taught from an early age that it is good to help our family members. We did that through helping our elder members and listening to the values that they have told you, which means that when you uniquely live with your family, we think that that gives you an access to community. The reason behind there were several. First, it is probably your parents that have the kind of relationships to your family or the kinds of communities that you live in. Your parents are the people that know other people that live inside of your neighborhood, which means that they help you provide unique community. But when you have a unique community, this gives you values such as sharing of resources. This probably helps you in times of need, when you're suffering and you need your neighbor to look after you, or you probably want them to give you certain resources that you otherwise would not have had. We think that that is absent under their work, because in a world where children are not obligated to take care of their parents, that is when they probably start living separately from their parents. They isolate themselves in different societies where other people that also isolate themselves live, which means that they probably over the long run go towards a society that is more individualistic in nature. We think that that is fundamentally wrong, because our society, especially Asian culture and the kinds of traditions that we've been following historically, have been built on communal values, where you teach child cooperation and the things that happen inside of a community. We think that culture and tradition is something that is uniquely lost under their work, and we think that that is a large loss under their work, because when you probably teach your child to grow up in a very individualistic community, that derives them of the emotional and the emotional values that they would have otherwise gotten by interacting with their grandparents or interacting with other members of a community. In my speech, I've proven to you that our principle still stands in the debate, and their response was not enough. But secondly, we also win on pragmatics. Propose.
Next one speaker for the fine speech, inviting the deputy leader of opposition to continue the case. Here.
Start in a few seconds. Opposition says that children are benefited by the parents. Side opposition says maybe children aren't benefited by the parents. We say that let's ask children themselves. So I think the first-hand experience of children getting benefits is realized by children themselves. So in instances where children feel that their parents have done enough, where they feel that the kind of obligation that they currently have extends to them going back and contributing to the parents, then they can do so. Side proposition has to defend that all children or children are required to fulfill that obligation, not that they go out and do that. So that is the first point of thing. The first important thing is a lot of the children already feel this obligation for several reasons. One, there is inherent glorification of parenthood and status quo. For example, we believe parents to be at the top of the world. We generate sense of respect and a lot of other things with their parents, and also additionally we have some kind of familial love and bond that we have created throughout the years, because of which a lot of the children will go back and contribute. The second important thing to note is in like first areas of their life. For example, 25 years, 30 years of the life, children are within the parents' control, where parents control their food, parents control their clothes, parents control their shelter, parents control their education and all of this. And the next half of their life, when these people actually want to live their own life, prioritize their own pursuit and change the world in the way that they want, side of proposition comes in and says, no, you have to go back to the same confinement that oftentimes confine your ideas about the kind of perspective that they are no longer able to expand from. And that is oftentimes go through the same process of massive religious and cultural indoctrination that they cannot get out of, because this trauma of overall the cultural and religious indoctrination continues to perpetuate because of the existing power dynamics within the family. Let's be very clear. We allow them a choice. That is to mean that not all children will escape from this obligation. In fact, many of them do. In Asian religious families, because of the communal values and the benefit that Elisa puts in, a lot of the people are already compelled to stay back with the family. Next, they claim about reciprocity. And I think it's important to recognize that parents do have a large level of contribution in the lives of children. We want to recognize the nature of that reciprocity and how much obligation they have. Firstly, not only did the children not consent to be born in that scenario, they were born in a state where they cannot take care of themselves. So the fact is, to give birth to a child and not to take care of him is to kill the child. Because in that state, because of the lack of conditions of survival, that person directly dies. So this obligation is not an extra benefit, but a right to protect someone who you chose to give birth to the world in instances where they would otherwise have died. And now notice, maybe there is a minimal element of consent on the part of parents, but they are the only one who could have any element of consent in the birth of the choice. Because not state doesn't decide that people give birth. It is oftentimes individual priorities that set this. Definitely, state does benefit them, and that is why this is the opportunity cost of having a child. Because the case here is that people sacrifice a lot to have a child. It is true, yes, they do sacrifice. But the question is, do they receive similar amount of benefits or more in response to that sacrifice that compensates for that obligation? So the first POI that I asked to Elisa was, if that is true, by sacrificing your right to have a child, then most probably single people who never have a child over the time, people who are in those kind of families should be the happiest people all around, because they don't receive the harms of childbearing, childbirth, and a lot of other problems. But what are the benefits that we get in that side? Firstly, we believe that there are a lot of benefits to having a child. State oftentimes allows you tax subsidies in many different states. There is a lot of benefits of establishing a families. Oftentimes in certain countries where population is low, state even gives you car and a house if you give birth, and in so many situations you directly benefit from that. But additionally, a lot of the times parents live their dreams through because of a child. Like for example, when they go on their pursuit to a certain point in time, they want to go out and prioritize their children. And the fact that they could love someone, they could have someone to take care of, someone who looks like them, or to some extent will become someone like your legacy, is something that is special to them. And that is why parents derive benefit from all of these kind of associations. But additionally, a lot of the people, yes please.
While we do agree that parents aren't perfect, don't you think in vast majority of cases, children are able to go out and change the world like they want to, because parents made them capable by providing them education and emotional support when they needed it the most?
Alright, so this is a couple of questions about this question. It is true that children might have been successful, but it is not true. It is entirely by the parents. But second, if you actually want children to succeed, I think you want to give them total freedom of them. So maybe the world that you are talking about, where children can go out of their families and build a life of their own, is not the world you are describing and defeating, because the context of this requires children to oftentimes abandon their responsibilities. But maybe, even in the best case scenario, let's say that children take care of their parents and are forced to do that. The question is the care better in that scenario? Because they never analyze it. They just say, because parents and children are connected, somehow the care given by children will be the best care. A couple of things here. Firstly, because in their world, children are obligated to take care. State is going to neglect them, because state says it is your responsibility to take care of your parents. That is why their case about better infrastructure and overall better prioritization of old age home doesn't occur, because the state oftentimes recognizes that it's a responsibility of the children to take care. But are children equipped to take care of them? We believe that state has control over larger infrastructure. They have control over lanes, larger data. It has control over larger amount of space that they can do. But alongside, state oftentimes has dedicated individuals taking care of their parents or taking care of the old age people. Alternatively, when children choose, they have to prioritize their own personal life and then take care of the parents. They have their own personal pursuit. If they believe these kind of things are essential for their success and individual desires, that means the quality of the care in association with the parents will also deteriorate based on that. But we didn't just talk about that. We told you that it is sad that some people have to live alone when they grow old. I think the problem in that context is one, the ability or the interest of the children to take care of the parents comes at the cost of their own personal pursuit. The question is, which is more important? And let's look at this. Parents have their entire life to plan for the kind of life that they want. And this is where the comparative comes in. Because state only reinforces bare minimum requirements. A lot of extra requirements are the ones that parents want to do because they love their children. For example, if any kind of things like, for example, the state's children doing a lot of parents giving a lot of love and care to the children was true, then state would punish all poor parents because they wouldn't be able to provide the adequate care that they want. The conception is the legal obligation to provide care for the parents is also very limited. Extra care is which they provide because they love their children, because they want their children to succeed. And within that paradigm, this debate occurs when they have to suggest why that care warrants something that children have to go on. Where parents have their entire life to plan for the kind of life they want, and children are forced into this kind of circumstance from birth and even after when they grow older. That is why this is a problematic situation. But we also talk about the situation where a large proportion of voter base is already old people. That is why currently in Nepal itself, we get unemployment benefits and old age benefits for old people as well in regards to this kind of things. The reason for this is these are the voter base who consistently turn out on elections and consistently vote for political parties, which is something that they would want on their side. And that is why this state is more likely to look at the interest of these kind of people because there is an existing political will. A large part of young people are apathetic to the current democratic system, and that is why they don't turn out to vote. And that is why, because these institutions, these people are still aware, they can do that. But in their world, they can just go out and say, there are children to take care of you, we don't need to take care of you. We don't want that word. Very proud to oppose them.